So this week is poetry, and I'm very excited. I'm sure some of you are a little bit like, I don't know where to go with poetry, but don't worry. While poetry might not be like super straightforward or easy, it is something that's accessible to everybody. You know, everybody has a little poet inside them. So don't be nervous. We'll get through this together, I promise. So let's take a look at what you have to do. So this week you've got these poems to read, and then your discussion board is basically to analyze. Oh, look, some of you have already done it. The discussion board is basically to analyze a single poem. In your analysis, be sure to touch on all or most of the functions found in poetry that are described in the textbook: sound play, rhyme, alliteration, stress, line length, and break, stanzas, imagery, connotation, metaphor, diction, denotation, connotation. Make sure if there are any to consider any themes present or pointedly absent, as well as the relationship of the speaker of the poem to the reader and to the author. Remember that the author and the speaker of the poem are not always the same person. So that's your discussion board this week. Please make sure you hit on all of those things. We're doing a deep dive, a deep analysis into a single poem that you read this week. Okay, then let's take a look at your writing prompt. This week you have to write 3 poems. So you're going to complete a poem for each of these. The first one is a replacement poem. I recommend you do this first. It gives you an idea of how to explore thoughts in a free verse poem. You're going to demonstrate the density of poetry techniques by writing a replacement poem. You're going to take any poem that you admire from this week and replace all the nouns, verbs, adjectives, and adverbs with other words that are in the same part of speech. Uh-oh, look at all this. With words, with other words. Anyways, so on page 318 in the textbook, you see a really good example of this. The first line, let me check. So the first line, for example, in imaginative writing, the line ends with the words low garden. And then the replacement poem, the last 2 words are plastic kitchen. So you see these are very different, but in the end, they're still going to make sense. Your poem is still going to make sense. So just trust the process and replace all those words. I should see none of the original poem left over. Okay, after that, you're going to write a poem about your body. Write a poem about your body. This could be a poem in which you physically describe your body or the experience within your body, or it could be used the body as a symbol. Think outside the box if you like, but just give me a poem about your physical vessel. It must include a color, must include the word swallow. That could be a verb or a noun, like the bird. And it must be at least 15 lines. So the line length is up to you. Don't forget your enjambment. And then finally, the kitchen. You must include, so write a poem that describes the scene in a kitchen that you're familiar with, your parents, your friends, a neighborhood diner. However, you cannot be in this poem. Must include a kitchen. Someone must enter or leave the kitchen at some point in the poem. You cannot physically be in this poem, and it needs to be at least 10 lines. If you really want to see my example, I'm not going to pull it up again because I've got to go to work. But if you want to see my example, I'll leave the other crappy fiction lecture up. You can skip a couple minutes in, you can see my poem, The Kitchen example. Oh, finally, please make sure you title your poetry. I didn't write that on the assignment sheet. I need to go back and add that, but every poem should have a title. This is true for everything you write. Give everything you write a title. Oops. Okay, let's talk a little bit about what they said in imaginative writing. So here we have sound. Sorry, it's a little off the page. So in poetry, sound is so important. That's really kind of what makes the readers attached to the writing, right? That's really like what speaks to you in poetry is the sound of the words. So I love this on page 299. For me, coronary thrombosis suggests drums reverberating through the tops of trees. So right there, we've got this strong sound phrase, coronary thrombosis. And for some, it might be very medical. And for others, it might just be this very strong sound, right? So work these sound phrases into your poetry. Another good piece of advice is write in full sentences. Use standard punctuation. Too often, beginning poets feel that a string of adjective phrases amounts to a mood, or that sentence fragments can conjure up drama. It doesn't, and they don't. So please speak like you would in prose. Experiment with these full thoughts, these full sentences. I promise you it's much more powerful. And then you have much more, this is a great way to sort of wrap both those things up. You have much more interesting things inside of you than cliches and fragmented lines. Go for the weird, unique, concrete details just as you would in other creative writing. So please, we're going to talk about cliches in just a second, but be as weird and unique as you can. Oh, come on. Okay, the poetic line. So I want you to think about what I just said about extending a sentence, extending these thoughts into full sentences, and think about the poetic line and how it operates not as a substitute for what you're writing, but in addition to it. Experiment with caesura or pauses within the line, such as commas, periods in the middle of your poetic line count as a caesura. Some people put extra spaces to make a caesura, and enjambment, so the running on of sentences from one line to the other, as well as end stops, the end of the line coinciding with the end of the thought. So all of these things are important. Just like we've been talking about paragraphing, this signals to your reader what they're supposed to be doing with their brains and how they should be processing this information. Every choice you make is important. Each of these is significant in the way that it manipulates the pacing, right? So just like in a paragraph, you are telling your readers when to stop and pause. Denotation and connotation. So denotation is the literal or primary meaning of a word. Hopefully you guys learned this in high school. If not, that's okay. So mother, the dictionary definition of mother is a woman in relation to her children, whereas the connotation of mother, the emotional connection to a word, is how you feel when you read it, right? So the connotation of mother could be love, support, femininity, or in a negative connotation, it could be hate, estrangement, neglect. But remember, poetry experiments with the layering of words. So maybe you have this loving mother, but you've also got this connotation of neglect, right? So you layer these ideas to create this very full and important meaning, right? These layered connotations. Just because you have a connotation to a word, however, doesn't mean that the reader will have the same connotation. So you have to be clear. You have to be certain what you're saying and not just hope that the reader will understand it. Imagery and metaphor. Remember that not all images are metaphor. Sometimes, as Robert Haas puts it, that they do not say this is that. They say this is, talking about imagery, right? So remember, sometimes a couch is just a couch where you go to do couch things. Couch doesn't have to be heaven. Couch doesn't have to be safe space. It can just be a place where you go and watch television. On the other hand, metaphor has a stronghold on the imagination because of its dual qualities of surprise and precision. Dickinson said it was the mode of juxtaposing elements of concrete things with equally fundamental ideas and feelings: grass, stone, heart, majesty, despair. And many successful metaphors compare two concrete sensory details and allow then abstract connotations on the reader's end to work for themselves. For example, a piggy and fishy air. I mean, right there, a piggy and fishy air. We don't even have any abstractions there. It's literally like pig and fish and air. We got three concrete things, but it's working towards this abstract idea, doesn't it? It gives you this abstract feeling where you can kind of connect to what it is that this metaphor is saying, even though it's just three concrete details. Okay, I love that I wrote plaque on here and didn't realize it for a really long time. But cliches, you want to avoid them like the plague, haha. There are certain imagery that can be cliche as well. Boiling blood, ocean blue eyes, a screaming siren. We've seen these things before. I'm sure that you guys have some piggy and fishy airs within you that you are just dying to get out. So try to avoid using cliches. Try to steer your poetry in directions that are fresh and surprising, right? We want these things that jump off the page and sort of scream at us, right? The piggy and fishy airs of the world. Here are some common examples of cliches, like a kid in a candy store, lost track of time, time heals all wounds. Even some things that you guys might be wanting to write about, such as like, your first broken heart or being so like connected one with the universe kind of thing. These are all things we've seen before, we've talked about before. I mean, go for it if you want to. But just know I'd much rather read things that are a new take, surprise me, shock me, scare me. I know you can do it. Finally, this is so off the page, but you can look at it in imaginative writing. Finding the poem, honestly, that can be the hardest place to start, is figuring out what you want to write about. But just once you've settled on an image or a line, any embodiment in words of that impulse, of an impulse that stays with you, that's where the work begins. So grab onto that piggy fishy air. Find that surprising moment. Shock me with a single line and then see where you can go from there. On page 316, there's a series of suggestions, and I love these suggestions. Please, please, please go look at page 316. Use the series of suggestions to draft at least one of your poems this week. Nobody will know. I will not even know. And you might actually find something within you that surprises you, that surprises me, that is outside that realm of, just cliche poetry that we see all the time. Okay, that's all that I have. I'm working through, I just got through the bumper stickers. I know some of you, have sent me emails saying I'm moving too slow with the feedback, but I promise you, you don't want to be on my end working 3 jobs. And also, each of these fiction pieces at least take me a very, very, very long time to read and respond to, even the bumper stickers. And I think that you would agree that it's only fair that I give the same quality and quantity of feedback to every student. So be patient with me. Remember that the experience of reading, writing, thinking, learning in this class comes from the doing, comes from the experimenting. All of this is an introduction to creative writing. So just embrace the experience, embrace the moment, do the reading, and I promise you, you will get feedback from me. You'll be hearing from me. If you want direct feedback, like if you want to have a little mini one-on-one, just schedule a office hours meeting. I had to reschedule with one of you recently, and I'm so sorry, but I think that you rescheduled, and we're coming up on that meeting. So, okay, until next time.